Hello. So for this video, we are going to talk about the notions and myths of communication. Communication is about talking or writing. Communication is more than just speaking or writing. Some individuals, particularly those who are deaf, rely on visual communication too. However, there are many people who believe that if you get a response, then a message has been communicated. There are others who respond too quickly, so do not fully understand the information being given to them. When a message is given to us, our brain needs time to process the information. Our brain uses a number of biases as filters to work out the meaning. So if we respond without fully listening, our emotional center, the amygdala, responds, not the part of the brain that processes information. So my tip is to listen and understand, not listen to reply. Responding comes later after you fully understand the information being conveyed.
Yun na
Mabilis
lang.
po yung oras.
Sige, go.
Okay, ma'am. Question number 1 po. What do you think communication is?
Communication for me is not just a two-way process. It is always aiming for understanding. If there's no understanding between two persons having communication, then that's a miscommunication. Yeah, that's what I believe about communication.
Okay, ma'am. Question number 2 po. Why is communication so important?
There's a saying that no man is an island. So no matter what happens, you'll still be looking for another person to relay your experiences, to share your knowledge to other people. So you really have to communicate, regardless of if you're talking, as long as you're understanding each other, that's a communication already.
Okay, ma'am. For question number 3 po. What do you think myths is communication are?
Myths and communication are making us understand more what communication is. It has a negative notion when we say myths in communication. It gives us a negative ideas about communication, which most of the time are not true. But having those myths, it gives us a clear view of what is a communication.
Thank you po. For question number 4 po. Can you give an example of a myth or a notion in communication?
One notion that I always tell my student as well is that, especially in the Philippines, if someone speaks in English, everyone thinks that that person is a good communicator. But we all know that's not true. Communication is not just about speaking in English or even in Tagalog. Communication is being understood. So even if you're just giving them a gestures or doing the sign language, that's a communication. You don't have to be really good in speaking.
Okay po. For question number 5. Does the way of communicating or communication change over time? How did myths affect it?
Of course, it changes. That's a constant thing in this world. Beauty Queen would say, change is the one constant thing that in this world we change every time. And language is dynamic as well. Even if it's being spoken or non-verbal, it changes every day. So myths, how would myth affect the changes is because it gives us an idea that this myth is not applicable when it comes to communication. So I think that's how it would help it.
For question number 6 naman po. Why is it important to declaw myths for today's communication?
Not sure why you're using the word declaw, because for me, we can never take away myths from communication. But don't get me wrong. When we say myths, this or in this world, there's always a good and a bad thing. So you just have to weigh things out. So myth, I don't think that it should be declawed or removed. It is something that would add us to understand more what is communication. Yeah. Okay.
Ako, okay ma'am, for question number 7 po. How these myths and notions became some of the barriers in communication.
It became a barrier when it is not being explained well. Or if the person is being close minded, um, or they would easily believe on things without weighing things first. Um, that would really affect communication. And again, like what I've said in the first question, it's not communication if there's no understanding.
Okay ma'am, thank you. For question number 8 po. Can these myths and notions lead to miscommunication?
Yes, related to the question earlier, if it's not being understood, then it's a miscommunication. Those myths would give the wrong idea to people, and if it is being taught in school, and something is not clear. So this is very tricky when we're teaching inside the classroom. It has to be well explained because if not, then we're creating people believing in myths and not believing in proper way of communicating.
So for question number 9 po. How these notions and myths help us to get rid of barriers.
Um, each of us must have a discipline on believing on something. Okay, when we hear something, we have to take some time and understand first. So these myths are like a good reminder to us um, that we have to analyze first everything that we hear, everything that we read, and everything that we listen to. We have to analyze first if those are good or bad. So it would help us in proper way of communicating if we would identify that this is a myth, this is a wrong notion. So we have to avoid doing that in the future in order to have a good communication with other people. I'm always saying this because in special education, you don't if you're not getting or you're even if you're trying but you're not having a good communication, there is a problem with your social skills, and it's not their choice. That's why I keep on saying this, because if you're not coming up with proper communication, then you're under the special education. Yeah.
Okay ma'am, for last question po, question number 10. Do you consider these myths and notions to be helpful? Why yes and why no?
um, it's both yes and no. Is that okay? It's a yes, it's helpful. Like what I mentioned earlier, you just have to analyze. So these are your reminders that these are the things that you should not do, and these are the things you should not believe in. It's no, it won't help if you're very, you have this very critical mind that you're overthinking of things, and or if you are the type of person that would easily believe on things, then it's a no. So that depends on the person. Yeah, that's it. Is that all?
It's, I know.
Okay.
Thank you po
Thank you.
ma'am.
Okay, babush.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Roel, for that. Now, let's proceed with Miss Eliza. Miss Eliza?
Myth 2. Communication just happened to assume makes an ass of you and me. Just because you open your mouth and say something or put something in writing does not mean you have conveyed information that will be understood. It is a good idea to get someone else to check that what you want to say or write is clear. My additional note to this is to ask someone who is different to you. We all have differences, cultural, age, gender, and so on. If you are going to convey information to a wide range of people, avoid checking with someone who is like you. Get a true sense of whether the information is understood. As someone who is outside your normal in group.
What do you think is communication? A process by which information is exchanged between individuals through a common system of symbols, signs, or behavior, exchange of information, personal rapport. Why is communication so important? Good communication is fundamental in learning because this serves as a very important tool in passing quality information. From the teacher to the learner, having good communication helps to avoid misunderstanding and aids in developing strong bond and mutual trust between the teacher and the students. Why is it important to declare myths from today's communication? Myth is an idea or story that is believed by many people but that is not true. A story that was told in an ancient culture to explain a practice, belief, or natural occurrence. In a classroom settings wherein many subjects are presented and discussed, there are subjects wherein sharing medical information is inevitable because it is part of a subject, but when it comes to personal issues in life wherein children's moral values are at stake and affected, it is where we, educators, are to declare myths from today's communication, because in shaping the children's values, truth should be presented instead of myth. Can you give an example of a myth or a notion in communication? Some people aren't born to be great communicators. Can these myths and notions lead to miscommunication? Yes, because contrary to popular belief, great and effective communicators are made, not born. We all have the potential to be effective communicators. With the right guidance and dedication to improving plus constant practice, our communication skills can improve each day. Do you consider these myths and notions to be helpful? Why yes and why not? No, especially in a classroom setting wherein we are encouraging students to speak up their hearts and minds in every aspect and subjects that we are dealing with. This notion will hinder them in cooperating and participating in every class, activities, and discussion. This will hinder their growth and confidence cognitively and effectively. Now with Mr. Jomar. Jomar?
We all use the same language, so everyone should understand it. It is wonderful that some people want to play linguistic gymnastics with information, but to keep it simple works wonders too. People don't want to waste time trying to decipher acronym or work-specific jargon. Time is money. Life is short. So keep it simple.
What do you think is communication? Why is communication so important? How can these notions and myths help us get rid of barriers? Do you consider these myths and notions to be helpful? Why yes and why no? Communication brings us closer together. Through communication, it builds us the relationship with one another. Communication is important because it helps us express our thoughts about things, and it also helps us to be understood by the people we communicate with. There are a lot of communication barriers, but if we open our mind in getting rid of those barriers, we can absolutely do it. There are a lot of seminars or webinars that are related to communication barriers. We just have to open our arms that barriers are normal and we can remediate it. Yes, communication is unstoppable. Whether we speak different language, we can still find our ways to communicate with others. Can you give an example of a myth or a notion in communication? Communication is about talking or writing. Communication is more than just speaking or writing. Some individuals, particularly those who are deaf, rely on visual communication too. However, there are many people who believe that if you get a response, then a message has been communicated. There are others who respond too quickly, so do not fully understand the information being given to them. Now, Mr. Aaron, share with us your thoughts.
Met for everyone that the email so they are in the lab. Do not assume your email has been received or have been understood. Communication is about checking that everyone has received information and understand it.
Miss Andrea, it's your turn.
There is no time for questions. I honestly believe there's no such thing as a stupid question. There is always that one person who attends meetings who constantly asks questions all throughout, winding everyone up because the answers seems obvious or the question seems trivial. Questioning is how people develop critical analysis skills. They are also a good indicator that someone is actively listening because they are trying to make sense of information within their own understanding. So, encourage questions. If you don't like people asking you questions, then you probably need communication training.
What do you think is communication? I think communication is a two-way process. There must be a speaker and a listener or a receiver. Why is communication so important? Communication is important for us to convey our message to others and listen to them as they speak as well. It is important to every person to learn how to communicate and why do you communicate. What do you think are the myths in communication? Myths in communications are something that may be believed by people, but there is no truth in it. Myths explain something about communication, although incorrect, but creatively. Can you give an example of a myth or a notion in communication? Communication is about talking or writing, by George Bernard Shaw. Does the way of communicating or communication change over time? How did myths affect communication? From the myth I have mentioned in number 4, for me communication is not always about talking or writing. How about those deaf and mute who cannot hear and talk? They usually rely on what they see, so in communication it involves the 4 macro skills: listening, speaking, reading, and writing, and also appeals to our 5 senses for us to understand the conveyed messages. Why is it important to declare myths from today's communication? Communication changes over time, as we are now living in a new generation where technology is everywhere. The medium and the ways of communication became complex and free of style and digital. Can these myths and notions lead to miscommunication? I think somehow it leads to miscommunication, because sometimes we just listen to messages and reply or comment even though we don't understand its real meaning, what the message is trying to say. So my tip is, listen to understand, not listen to reply. How can these notions and myths help us get rid of barriers? I think notions and myths, though they are just opinions or beliefs about communication, we can draw or observe what is around us, how communication process is done. If we know that there is something we should improve in communication, then get what is beneficial and forget the useless one. Do you consider these myths and notions to be helpful? Why yes and why no? From notions and myths, we will be able to be more observant and improve what we should be improved in communication. Learn to think critically, adapt what is in trend, and make possible ways to make better communication. Thank you. Now let's proceed with Miss Camille.
Myth 6. Visual information has limited value. The brain actually processes visual information far quicker than sound. Visuals are a significantly better way of conveying information than text. This is why social media apps like Snapchat and Instagram work. A picture paints 1,000 words. Flow charts, graphs, timelines, and maps all help with conveying information. Using colors for key information can also make information clearer. Visuals can help you avoid misunderstanding, so if information can be conveyed visually, then use visuals instead of text.
Now, Mr. Roel Valicera.
Videos communicate our message. Subtitles, subtitles, subtitles. I cannot say this enough. Vlogs, videos on your website or in presentations need to include subtitles. Some of us may well appreciate your dulcet tones. However, your message is important. Why waste time creating videos that are inaccessible? Second language users, people with hearing loss, can't hear what you have to say. Why go to all that effort for nothing? A simple tip is that subtitles go with video just as strawberries go with cream.